and I've always said this, I told my kids this, I've learned a whole lot more from my losses than I ever did from my win. When you win, everything's went right. When you lose, you got to figure out what went wrong. What can you do better? What can you improve on?
Beating grown men as a scrawny 12-year-old boy, he knew he had a gift. World champion arm wrestler Charles Hamby is still competing in a sport that just may be in the Olympics one day. Find out how this 54-year-old stays in shape and continues competing on this gripping episode of A Tale to Tell. All right, I'd like to welcome my guest Charles Hamby to the podcast today. Hello, Charles.
Good morning. How's it going, Don?
Good. Thank you for being with us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Appreciate the invite, and
absolutely.
Always good to see you.
This is, in my opinion, could almost be a movie, like Over the Top.
Yeah, or Joe Dirt.
Back in the day. Back in the day. Well, there's some exciting things to talk about. Let's go back to your childhood, if you don't mind. I'd like to know. I know you grew up in Texas, but tell us a little more about that. And
grew up in Texas. Went to elementary school in Giddings, Texas, and then
which is where?
It's between Austin and Houston.
Okay.
And
small town?
Small town. It was 2,000, 3,000 people at the time. Old town. And then I ended up growing up most of my life there in, some in Round Rock and then College Station. And grew up, had my parents divorced, and I had a great stepdad. And so I had really good parents in that, and good upbringing.
Great. And I'm assuming you grew up out in the country.
Yes, grew up on the country on a farm, and and that probably all the farm work and stuff, and probably has played a part in why I arm wrestle and compete.
Yeah. So when did you start this arm wrestling? How old were you? Were you a teenager?
Well, it's funny. It's like everybody arm wrestles, just playing around at school and everything. So I did the same thing. And then my granddad had he was a carpenter, had a business in College Station. And I would work the summers, Christmas vacation, all. And then they would arm wrestle at lunch. And I was 12 years old, working the summers and stuff. Now that'd be almost criminal now, But it got where I would be arm wrestling these grown men and winning at 12 years old.
And were you a big kid?
Oh, no. I was a skinny little kid.
How big were you?
Oh, man. I bet I was 115 pounds maybe.
And 12 years old?
Yeah.
And you're beating grown men on a
men
construction site.
On a construction site. A lot of plumbers.
You must have pissed off a lot of men.
Well, I think they were more amused than anything.
And they were giving it their all.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not at first.
That's how it got started. It started one guy. Then before long, there'd be another site. It was like a whole cul-de-sac there, that they're building houses. And then at lunch, they'd come over, hey, we got this guy you want to try. And these are grown men. And so it was more, I think, surprising to them, and it was great for me. It was attention, and everything. Yeah. And so back then you didn't have organized arm wrestling. We didn't anywhere where I was. So I played around with it, and then I'd arm wrestle when I got my teenage years for a little bit of money and stuff, and nothing nothing big, just playing around.
Sure.
Went into the Navy, and they had A events there. I was up in Great Lakes in boot camp, and I won that. And it wasn't like an official table or anything, but it was close as I'd ever been to an actually organized arm wrestling match. About the time I was getting out, when I was in the Navy, I got stationed in Pensacola, Florida, and I was on the USS Lexington, which is now in Corpus Christi. It's a floating museum. But had a friend from Texas also, and he was a better pool player than me. And we would go out and hit different bars. We'd play pool for money, and I'd arm wrestle for money.
Oh, you guys were hustlers.
We made lots of money. We did, and I only weighed 145 pounds then, so I was about 20 years old, and I did real good when we would go out and do that.
And would you go up against guys your size?
Oh,
or
a lot bigger, a lot of bouncers, 300 pounds. So I was like half their size.
Oh my goodness.
But I did real well. Again, this is barroom arm wrestling, still nothing organized.
Must have caused some barroom fights once in a while too.
One, okay. And they weren't mad at me, and so it was all good. It was all good. But for the most part, still, because I was so small at that time, people just didn't get mad. It was they were surprised, and it actually a lot of these guys turned out. I'd see them, and we got along fine. After I got to know them, they got to know me. So then when I got out, the movie Over the Top came out.
So it was about the same year, wasn't that? Came out in '87, and
87,
did you get out of the? Now we're about the same age, aren't we? Because I graduated high school in '85.
Yeah, same as me.
Okay.
So
then you spent 2 years in the Navy. So you were getting out of the Navy in '87.
Yeah, and probably about 80. Yeah, right around '87.
So they were going to do the movie with you, but they chose Sylvester Stallone instead.
No, not likely. But so that movie came out. And I went and seen it, and I'm like, man, I want to compete. I felt like I could do good.
Fired up.
So when that movie came out, then you started having tournaments. So my mom and them were living in Caldwell, and that's where I was living. And
Caldwell, Texas.
Caldwell, Texas.
Okay.
And they had a tournament there, and they had tournaments other places. So at this tournament there was 3 state champions there, and I beat 3 state champions my very first tournament.
Wow.
So within 4 months, I was 4th in the world. I went to California, flew out to California, and did competed, took 4th in the world. Within 8 months, I was 2nd in the world, and so I was doing pretty good. And after I won that first tournament, I felt real good. Went to my next tournament, and it was a big tournament, and I came across some tough guys, and I just got handed to me. It was like, wow, this is. But then after that, and I've always said this, I've told my kids this, I've learned a whole lot more from my losses than I ever did from my wins.
Absolutely.
When you win, everything's went right. You're able. When you lose, you got to figure out what went wrong. What can you do better? What can you improve on? And so my most memorable matches has been my losses, I think. It's been great when I won, don't get me wrong, that's why you compete. But I really have gained a lot more out of my losses. So to come off one tournament where you do so well, and then come out another one where you terrible, and to be new at it and figure out what did I do wrong? Well, it was just had to put things together.
So Charles, you were living in Texas, and you were a multiple Texas state champion.
Yeah, yep, right around 20 state championships total.
Wow. And then now you're on the world circuit, if you will, on that stage, kind of up and down. And how long did you continue to compete? Because I know you started a family after a certain amount of time,
and that was I'm law enforcement, and I have been for 30-something years now, and
appreciate your service.
And, well, thank you.
In the Navy as well.
Yeah, and. Law enforcement schedules it can be tough on training, going days, night, and everything, but and then having kids. So it worked out great. I love graveyards. So I'd work 5P to 5A. I'd get off and work out from 5 to 7, and then I had a side business I would do. And so that 2 hour was very important to me. And then on days off, we'd get together and train. I'd drive, sometimes we'd drive, 100 miles somewhere to train. But I never let it interfere with my family or my job.
Were you like Sylvester Stallone, and you worked out while you were driving down the road?
Not going down. Well, I'd have pulleys, or not pulleys, but bands back way before they were a thing.
Vehicle?
Yeah, oh yeah, yeah. You could now that it's been a long time, but the cage you could tie some bands around that, like a inner tube or something, and use that inner tube when you were patrolling late at night or something. So okay. I don't know if that would work nowadays, but it worked back then. So and at that time. Competing was a big part of me because being in law enforcement, you have to stay in shape. If physically, it's very important that you're in shape, you're not in a job where you're constantly working out, but you're in a job that if you're not in shape for when you need to be, it can cost you your life. So that's when I got in law enforcement, when I started working out, because training for arm wrestling, I won nationals without touching weights, but it had to do with the work I was doing. Then I got into law enforcement. I was like, okay, I'm not doing the physical stuff because I worked construction and everything before. And then, like I said, in law enforcement, physically, it's a job that it's dangerous if you're not in shape. So that's when I started working out. And I really liked that. I started competing in powerlifting also. And again, I didn't let it interfere with my family and my job and everything. And it actually helped. The public relations part of it, being who I was in the arm wrestling and all that, it really helped. I could go on a call or something, and somebody that read about me in a paper or something, we had a conversation now. And it could break the ice. Somebody that may be upset, oh, I seen you, and it gives us something to talk about.
Well, and your fellow officers, I'm sure, had great respect for you, and you're a humble guy, but your work ethic and everything must have made them want to rise to the occasion and work harder too.
I feel like it did, and I feel like when you take care of yourself, you respect yourself, and to stay in shape, to do certain things, to dedicate yourself to anything that takes, dedication and stuff, that it gives you self-respect, but also you learn to respect others also. And I think it just makes you a better person. I think that you know the work it takes to accomplish something. You have goals. You work hard to reach those goals. And just being that type of person, no matter who it is and no matter what your goals are, I think it really it makes you more respectful to others. And so I think it was a combination of that stuff. So
Charles, you ended up moving from Texas to Colorado.
Yep.
In what year?
It was 2001.
Okay.
And it was funny. Me and my wife got married here on a ski trip. We had planned it all out, had the church set up, everything, and then our 10th anniversary, which March 11th is our anniversary, and our 10th anniversary we spent here. We moved. We got here on the 7th. Our anniversary was on the 11th, and we always said we would want to move here and raise our kids here. So we made the move when our kids were still real young. So.
So during that period of time, I'm sure you weren't arm wrestling as much because you're raising a family and your career changes and whatnot, and you're getting older, but you kept working out. I mean, I've known you for a long time. You've been hitting the weights for a long, long time.
Yeah, and you know how it is. It's having a family. Life happens. I'll talk about it all the time. I don't remember my 40s. Because that's when our kids were really busy. That's when they were involved in their sports, their stuff. That always took priority. And but I would get in and come in spurts. If I was training if I was competing at a level that I did earlier, I just couldn't do it, and I knew that because I was dedicated to my family, and that was priority. Period. But I'll still go out and compete and stuff. Actually, once I got up here is when I started training for the Tough Man competition.
Okay.
So, that was something I'd done. But again, everything became more in spurts.
Sure.
To not interfere with it. But it also helped keep me in shape and stuff.
Now, let me go back a little bit in time. You had talked about powerlifting. You weren't a big guy in your youth. I think you had said at one point in time, you had maybe were 180 pounds, but when you went in the Navy, you got down to like 140,
Yep.
150 pounds. Well, then you started lifting weights. Did you start putting on quite a bit of weight?
I was 186 pounds a day I went into the Navy. The day I got out of boot camp, I was 145. And I stayed right around there for probably about a year. And then I started gradually, like we all do, started going up. Got into law enforcement, started academy in 88. 89, I went to the first department I worked for, and that's when I started hitting the weights.
Okay.
And I was competing pretty steady at about 210. So I stayed at 210, light heavyweight division for quite some time. And I would also drop a little bit, and I would go 3-4 weight classes, just for as much competition as I could do.
Sure.
Now I'm about 235, 240.
I know it's hard for me to picture you at 140, 150 pounds beating these men that are as big or bigger than you are now. And just to go back in time, I mean, what do you attribute, because you weren't lifting weights back then, you were obviously working on the farm, but what do you attribute that unbelievable strength to?
Tendon and genetics. And it is. I mean, it's like anything else. Well, with arm wrestling, we've all seen these little skinny guys that can arm wrestle.
Yeah.
Well, it's that tendon strength.
I've said before, strength and size don't have to live in the same house,
That's exactly right.
Right? Because you know this. I mean, I know relatively small guys that are strong as can be, and I know big guys that aren't that strong.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine actually lives over in the San Luis Valley, a cattle rancher, David Off, kind of like you, about 6 foot, and we used to live together many, many years ago, about 140 pounds, and I talked him into doing an arm wrestling contest locally, and he said, no. I said, just do it, trust me, because I knew how strong he was, and he ended up winning, and he was just proof that you don't need to be a big guy. Yeah. So many people have that misconception, whether it's arm wrestling or wrestling or lifting weights. Don't let the sight deceive you.
And that's a good point you just brought up too. You have a guy that's strong enough to win tournaments and stuff. That it just wasn't in his interest. And one of my favorite matches I ever had, I was out on West Texas around Beaumont area, and a big fair they had there. And there was a guy showed up. He was probably about 10 years older than me. Never arm wrestled competitively, but he'd never been beat in a bar room either. And I mean, I hit him when we went, and it was like hitting a wall. And I smiled. I said, "We got a match." And it was just great arm wrestling, that guy, because he was just one of these guys. And you've had these guys in gyms, and you've known them, that they don't compete, but they have the ability. They train hard. They're dedicated, as dedicated to what they're trying to accomplish as anybody out there. But it's just not their deal.
Yep.
And I like that.
They don't have the same passion.
Yeah. And it's
that's
like,
fine,
like for me, competing and working out, it has to do with, number one, my profession, because of the dangers if you're not in shape. Number two, my family, to be physically fit enough so I come home safe, and to win, and to find that motivation in whoever you are, whatever motivates you to because I think about that. These guys are going to the gym all the time. They can do these things. What keeps them motivated? Mm-hmm. But there's something they have, and that's great. And I really respect that.
I mean, I'm a big fan of competition, whether that's in sport or, and not that I lift to compete, but I think, if we wake up in the morning, we have those challenges in front of us, and we have a goal, and we try to surpass that goal or reach that goal, and I think it's very, very important.
And where I'm at now, we don't have grandkids yet, but our kids are grown. So it's like, man, there's a part of me right now like, okay, this is a new time to get back in and start competing again. I'm healthy. I've been competing. I don't have any nagging injuries for all that. But one thing I do want to say, I've always been natural. Mm-hmm. And I would say 85% or more of the people I compete at the high levels are juicing.
And I have just tremendous respect for that, because I've ran into it in the gym business and bodybuilding and such, and that's the only way I would ever compete. And I wasn't a big guy, I'm 180 pounds, and when I did bodybuilding I was 170 pounds, but to me it's cheating.
It is.
So I have just even more respect for you in that, and the fact to turn the clock back and to be able to tell people, well, hey, I was beating grown men at 12 years old. You obviously weren't doing anything then.
And I never have. And the thing is, and that's another thing I've always taught my son, that the only regrets I've ever had is show up at a tournament and not be prepared and lose. That bugs me. Now, I have been absolutely in shape and have went to a tournament and got beat. I'm okay with that, because I couldn't have given him any more. And the regrets is when I didn't dedicate myself. Mm-hmm. And that's what gets into that, when you've learned more from your losses.
So I want to talk about a couple different things, one of which you've coached others to do quite well.
Yeah.
I mean, Ben Bledsoe is a member here. I don't know some of the other gentlemen, but he is a strong
for pound, Ben is just incredible. And not just in arm wrestling. I mean, anything he decides to do, he gives it 150%. And again, and his girlfriend, they're just, and she's amazing. So Ben has a long, successful road ahead of him just with his work ethic and stuff.
Well, I just think it's really admirable that you're not selfish. You're willing to share your training techniques and just different things that you've learned throughout your life and help these younger men and women in their competitions. And I don't know if you're at liberty to tell me, but are there some particular little things that maybe are secrets for you? I mean, obviously I know there's some God-given natural abilities and tendon strength that you refer to, but are there some little tricks that our listeners might be able to take from this that might help them?
It's a whole lot easier to show you than tell you. Now, I will tell you, I've never been a technical arm wrestler. I've relied on my strength. Ben is one that has a combination of both. He's technically, able to put things together along with being strong. Developing tendon strength, is the big thing. You can have size of the arms don't mean as much as just having those tendons and training that works on those.
I was just gonna, speaking of tendon strength, a lot of people think, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I've done minimal arm wrestling, I usually never made it past the first or second round, and then I get my butt kicked. But tendons are unique in the sense that they're very dense and they don't have a lot of blood flow to them. And so actually higher reps can be very beneficial in working tendons. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't lift real heavy right? And I'm a big proponent, as you know, of mixing up your rep ranges and whatnot. But talk a little on that about some...
Now, I think it's important, and the thing is, you're the expert here on this, but for me, when I'm really working on tendon strength, it's a high rep training. Like right now, I'm doing sets of 20s. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of people don't think that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It helps me. I can sit there and do a month of those sets with 20s, and I don't have any, I'm not injured, my tendons are feeling good and all that. And then I'll do a month of 15s, then a month of 12s. So it really, that's what works for me, mm-hmm. The periodization training, mm-hmm. but with the higher reps. And, it works for me. A lot of it may be because I don't know if it would have worked as well mm-hmm. back in when I was younger.
And when you say periodization training, do you mean going back and forth between different types of, maybe lower reps, medium reps, higher reps?
Yes, exactly. And that's what I say. I start off with, like used to when I was younger, sets of 10 would be high reps for me. Maybe it's because of my age now, sets of 20 seem to be a lot more beneficial, and then gradually coming down.
So Charles, you and I are both, I'm 53, I'm going to be 54.
I'll be 54 in December.
Okay. So did I hear you say you're still competing or still want to compete?
Oh yeah, I do a lot of fundraiser stuff now. And right now we're focusing on veterans, like for the rally we do a tournament.
Four Corners motorcycle rally.
Mm-hmm. And everything got canceled last year with COVID, but there's a big guy coming up from Arizona. Makes me look like a little bitty guy. Super nice guy. So we're going to arm wrestle next rally, and he's about 375, about 6'4", 375, and he's like 11 years younger than me. So those are great. As fundraisers, I'm doing it for a good cause. I'm getting to show off a little bit, or I'm getting to get beat in front of everybody, so it goes both ways.
So speaking of that, I believe your daughter just got married. Down in Texas, right?
Yes.
I'm sure he's a fine young man. He sounds like a pretty big, strong guy, too.
Yep. He's actually he's in college right now to be a physical therapist.
Okay.
So he asked me what I do to work out, but I know the time's coming where I'll be asking him for advice.
So tell us the story about him wanting to arm wrestle you.
Well, he did early when they were dating, but then he had a friend come up for the wedding who's a football player for a college down in Texas, or was. And so they heard about me from my son-in-law. So we're at the reception there, and everybody's joking about he's going arm wrestling. Yeah, okay. Well, then he came up to me. He says, "Sir," he said, "would you mind if I arm wrestled you once?" I said, "Sure, you want to?" He said, I just got to try.
And he's how old?
Oh, he's in his 20s.
So he's in his 20s. You're 53.
Yeah.
And he figures he's probably going to
Yeah, he's very
Wax
respectful.
the old man here.
So I was able to do good. So he was had a lot of questions like, what does it take? You know, he says, I beat a lot of big guys, but don't, and he said, I couldn't budge you, you know. So I said, the old man strength, you know, you hear more about that now.
Yeah.
So it was fun. I mean, it's a lot of fun. And I really like these challenges more too in competing. Tournaments are tough on you. Mm-hmm. Getting all these different styles. But like for the fundraiser, when a guy comes up from Arizona, just training for one guy, that's so much easier than training for a whole tournament.
Sure.
You know, and your injuries are a whole lot less also.
And Charles, am I right in understanding that you don't always just train with your dominant arm? You've won championships with left and right arm.
Yes, left-handed too. I'm not near as good. And actually, what's weird is I'm focused completely with my strength right hand. Left hand, I use a lot more technique.
Okay.
And I guess I don't know why, but I do. And it's two completely different styles, completely different. But I'm real up and down left-handed. Like I've beat a national champion left-handed easy, and then I got beat by someone that just almost no experience. You know, I'm very inconsistent left-handed.
Do I remember a story about you, and I don't know if this was back when you were in the Navy, where you used to actually start guys just off the backside. What I mean by that for you listeners is that you were just a couple, 3 inches away from the bottom.
Yep.
To where all they had to move you was a few inches to win. So you were starting way back, and you told them that you could beat them in 3 seconds.
3 seconds.
And now, was this back when you were younger? And
this was when I was in the Navy. This was when I was in the Navy, and we would go out making money.
Sure.
And I mean, as small as I was, everybody would jump on that.
Sure.
And but the problem is that's where I was my strongest at. So
my goodness! So not only were you not starting on the top,
no,
you were way back here,
and it was easy for me. I would much rather start right there and let them roll their shoulder in, and just because I could pull their whole body over. Actually,
well, for those listening, and I know not everybody listening has arm wrestled, and I've done only a little bit, but I remember doing it, and it was on a competition table, and it was locally, and I knew right when I wrapped up with somebody, I mean, if they had an unbelievable grip, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've got a heck of a match here. But I can't even fathom starting way back here, close to being close to losing, and having to go that 3/4 of the way over.
Yeah, and again, that's where I felt my strongest at. It kind of locks me into a position there, So and I did that just recently too.
Yeah,
same thing.
Not out of wanting to, but I imagine you hurt some fellas as strong as you were.
You know, it's injury. It's a sport that you can get injured. I had one guy got his arm broke, but he was a big guy, steroids, and I think his muscle and stuff was more than his bones could handle, and it snapped his bone. And basically, what had happened was we were arm wrestling, and I was in that position. I start pulling him up slow, and it just snapped his arm right at the bicep.
Oh my goodness!
And that's one of the things when I referee, I'm very big on, because if you get a position where your shoulder gets ahead of your hand, it only takes 12 pounds of pressure to break that bone at the twist. But he wasn't even in a bad position, and it was a strange break.
Oh boy!
But anyway, as a referee, I stop those matches immediately if they get in a bad position.
I want to go back to the movie with Sylvester Stallone, Over the Top, which was back in '87. Now, in that, he was wrestling for his wife, who I think had heart disease, and a kind of an estranged son and whatnot. And obviously, it's a movie. But in that, he won, I believe, $100,000, and then they bought him a $250,000 semi-truck. I'm assuming you didn't win that kind of money.
Man, I'm on the poor end of that spectrum there.
But I mean, as a world champion, so explain a little bit of that. Like, where did everybody come to you? Did they come to Texas, or did you go to other places?
Because I've competed.
You go to Russia before?
Yeah, I went to Russia. I've competed in Virginia. California was because it was real hot in California, and that was a big place to go. And I learned a lot by competing over there. Virginia, I went. They had a I went undefeated against 14 countries at their world championship. And that's where I won my national championship at. So back in the 80s, 90s, there was just a lot of tournaments. And you're still hearing them. Now the money's gotten up a lot better now, especially at the higher levels, and there's different organizations now that really focused on the money. I'll be honest with you, I've never accepted money, and the reason why I always have it go charity is that there's been talk for all the years about going to Olympics, and it was a big question if you've ever accepted money if you could. So it just wasn't never big enough money for me to accept. Felt better about giving it to charity, so I've donated to many charities.
With some of the, excuse me for interrupting you, for some of the other so-called sports that they have in the Olympics, I personally would love to see arm wrestling.
A lot of people
think it'll ever happen.
I thought it would have by now. I think the time will. I think I'll be out. I'll be out of my age, to be able to compete at that level.
Sure, but maybe some of the people that you've coached, or maybe their
that
kids.
Would be awesome. And we're actually going to get started again. I'm putting on 2 tournaments here for sure. One at the rally to raise money for veterans, and then another one that we're going to be doing there down at the tribe for their Ute Fair when it comes up. So that's 2 tournaments. So I'm hoping to start doing more training, get more people involved in it, and so I'm looking forward to that. And for some of the reason what you said, these younger kids, maybe I'll play a part in training somebody that's able to go far.
Sure.
You mentioned Ben. We've had several people that trained through my, with me that I'm real proud of where they're at and what they've accomplished. And I it's kind of like your kids, no matter what I've accomplished, when my kids accomplish something, it means much more to you.
Yes, absolutely.
And and I know you know what I mean on that.
Sure.
But it's a fun. It's a competition. I think once you have that in you, that's why I still think, I could still do something at my age. I have time to train more, and everything. And so we'll see what happens.
What kind of advice do you have for anybody listening, particularly maybe some of these younger people listening, as far as whether that be work ethic or what have you?
If you want to do it, do it. If you feel, if it's like, man, I think I can do that, and don't ever get discouraged. I went to a tournament 2 weeks before my state championship, and they called me and the guy that we were both the number 1 and 2 guys in the state, light heavyweight. He slammed me so hard it was nothing I could do. 2 weeks later at state, I realized what I did wrong, and I slammed him, and I won. So my point is don't get discouraged. That's what gets people. They train, then they get in there, and that's the biggest. Man, stay with it. It's like anything else. If it's important enough to you, just keep working at it.
Well, like you said earlier, like most things in life, we're going to get our best lessons from our losses.
That's right.
And if we can bounce back and get back on the horse and not be afraid of getting bucked off, right?
And not being afraid, and don't the biggest regrets is not trying.
Yeah, for sure.
And like I said, I've had some fun times at Open Doors. You was talking about the movie Over the Top. I've got to arm wrestle a bunch of those guys. I got to travel to Russia. My wife and I've competed against people from all over the world. And
you may again. And you may again.
But I've also competed in pro wrestling. That opened the door. I had a 600-pound pro wrestler after I won Worlds. They set up a match with. He's the biggest guy I've ever arm wrestled. So I got to wrestle in that. We wrestled on TV a few times. Growing up watching that, so it was fun to do that. Was it something I would want to do forever? No, but it was a great. I can say I done it. I fought in Tough Man, one of the last Tough Men I ever had in Colorado. I've got to do some really neat things because doors were opened because of a small sport like arm wrestling, and so I've really enjoyed that road.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun.
No, it's exciting. Just real quick, always remember it. I'm the youngest of 7 kids, and I have 3 older brothers. And not that we did it a lot, but I'd arm wrestle my brother Chris, and I couldn't beat him. And he was small but strong as heck. And finally, my senior year, I was able to beat him. So it was a joy for me, not so much for him, but it was one of those things that you you just really still
have an uncle like that.
Appreciate. And well, Charles, my goodness, to wrap things up, I could talk to you all day, but first of all, I really appreciate again your service to the country and the Navy and everything you do as a police officer in this community, and obviously what you did in Texas. You're a great dad, great husband. I know you've ran for sheriff here and certainly got my vote and would again if you did it again. Your humility, your dedication, your work ethic is just to be admired and appreciated. And there's a lot of people, a whole lot of people in this community that look up to you, young and old and in between, men and women.
That means a lot to me. It does, and you know, Don, thanks for being a friend. And when I've come in for advice, you've always given me good advice, and that has went a long way, especially getting this older side of life here. You know, I've got questions when I work it out, and you've always given me good advice.
Oh, my pleasure. We got to do all we can, and I'm excited for you, man. I look forward to maybe coming and watching you arm wrestle again soon. I
will tell you one I do have on my list. There's my parents just moved up to Montana. And there's a big tournament they have up there, and it looks like I'm going to make a trip up there in August if everything goes accordingly, and just see if I can do good in another state.
Super.
So
why not?
So thank you, Don.
Thank you, Charles.
Really enjoyed this.
Yeah, maybe we can get you back. Who knows?
All right, that'd be great, man.
Thanks for coming on.
Yep.
This podcast is brought to you by the popular books Wellness Toolbox 1 and 2. These books are available on Amazon as well as at local Durango, Colorado merchants. Purchase your copies today.